Hey everyone, and I know I look sunburned, completely crispy. That's because I spent an afternoon boating to dig up my channel from the depth of the ocean since the latest YouTube algorithm change tanked me really badly. Anyway, first we've got Sony and Microsoft handing Linux maybe the biggest opportunity we've ever had to conquer the PC market. We'll talk about that. Then we have Google getting a giant 4 billion euros fine, which isn't much for them, but is still a pretty big slap in the face. And we also have a brand new Linux tablet that looks pretty cool and can run any Linux distro. It's not that weird ARM lockdown bootloader kind of crap. So let's get moving right after this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace. You've seen them all over the internet and you probably already know that they're your all-in-one platform to create, to manage, to deploy, and to build your own website. Of course, you don't need to know how to code to build your website because they have very easy to use tools with templates for all types of websites, pre-built page layouts, which lets you build the usual about page, a blog article, a page product for an online store. You don't have to think about the page layout, but you do have full power to customize things how you like, to move elements around. You have color palettes, fonts, free images to illustrate, basically everything you need to get everything up and running quickly. And Squarespace is not just for small websites, it handles multiple contributors with a full permission system, from comment moderation all the way to access to analytics and billing. Your login also lets you manage multiple websites at once if you run many different operations. And to make sure that you stay in control anywhere and over time, Squarespace has a mobile app for Android and iOS that gives you notifications for sales on your online store. It lets you manage payments and inventory. It lets you view all the metrics that you need to see where your website is going and how it is doing. So check out squarespace.com/theLinuxExperiment. The link is down in the description, of course. You'll get a 14 days free trial, and once we are ready to get started, you'll get a 10% off discount for your first purchase of a domain name or a website. So Sony and Microsoft both just handed the gaming market to Linux on a silver platter, and potentially the PC market as well, for the same reasons. Sony announced that they would drop physical discs for PlayStation entirely in 2028, which has huge ramifications on your platform of choice. They say consumer preferences shifted away from physical media to digital and that they're just adapting to it. They say games will only be available from the PlayStation stores and at retailers in digital form only. That means that they will just sell you an empty plastic box with a download code, just like it's happening for GTA 6, which is pretty depressing. Sony didn't answer questions about how people could share those games with friends, something that they had mocked Xbox for at the beginning of the previous gen. And right in the same breath, just to show you that Sony is not a reasonable platform holder, they decided to first shutter the PS3 and PlayStation Vita stores. They will go offline in July 2027, but sooner in Latin America and certain Middle East countries. At least they will apparently let people download the stuff that they bought on these stores for the foreseeable future, but that's no guarantee in the long run. They also showed they are really treating your purchases as just licenses because they just removed 500 movies from their catalog. And in the process, they also removed them from users' libraries because you didn't buy the movie, you bought a license to view it, and Sony can revoke that license at any point, which they will do for video games as well in the future. The deal with the film's owners expired, which means that the movies are now gone. You lost your money, you're not getting a refund either. And if they can do that with movies, they will do so with video games in the future. There is zero reason they wouldn't do it. It already happened with specific games. You had an old Deadpool game that got pulled, you had the Scott Pilgrim game that was impossible to play for a while. It happened and it will happen again. And apparently, Xbox will also follow in the same footsteps. Reports are claiming that they're testing a feature that would let you transfer a disc-based game into a digital game instead, since their next console, Project Helix, would very likely not have a disk drive. This would basically tell Microsoft that yes, you have a right to use this game on your account even without the disk, but the moment someone else inserts that disk in their own console, that license is transferred to them and you lose it. That's what they call digital entitlement. It's not digital ownership. Now, all of this paints an absolutely abysmal picture for the future of console gaming. Why would you want to invest in a specific platform, namely PlayStation, where the owner owns the hardware, the OS, the entire store and who can sell what on it, so the entire pricing scheme, and has all the licenses in their hand that they can revoke and that they've shown that they are willing to revoke willy-nilly without giving you a refund at all? If Microsoft goes the same route, then the only reasonable way to play games is on PC. And I know what you're gonna say. Yes, on PC everything is digital as well. Yes, if you buy from Steam, Heroic, GOG, whatever, generally don't have boxes. But there is competition on PC that doesn't exist on consoles. On PC, if you want to buy a game, you can buy it from Steam, from Heroic, from GOG, from other weirdo launchers. It works. And this has prevented companies like Valve, for example, who is basically a monopoly on PC gaming, from implementing absolutely horrendous anti-customer practices. So PC is looking like the only way to go to play games, because any other platform will just lock you in and treat you as a money bag instead of a person that has ownership of what they have. And if you go PC, you're not gonna go Windows because it is an abysmal operating system, so chances are SteamOS has a really big shot here. And even with the disappointing sort of launch of the Steam machine, you still have that giant opportunity to create a big platform, SteamOS, open to potential other stores, because that's the case on SteamOS too, even though it's not super easy to integrate, it is possible. You have that opportunity to create more partnerships, more computers, more economies of scale to sell those PCs, and Linux as a whole has a bigger shot of getting its foot in the door, getting more apps, more market share, more pre-installed hardware. I think this is one of the biggest shots we ever got, ever since Windows Vista maybe. We need to take it, and we might actually get some big market share out of this. I really do hope customers will see the value of PC, of SteamOS over consoles. I was all ready to keep my PlayStation 5, but with these announcements, it is definitely not gonna happen. This is going to be fully sold, and I'm transitioning to a Steam box. Not the Steam machine, but a Steam console that I will build myself with SteamOS. And to help make that win even bigger, there's also good news for that PS5, which I might actually give a shot to. It now runs Linux, even better than it did. The PS5 Linux project got some updates, and it now supports the ability to use an M.2 SSD as the Linux partition. It supports 4K 60 FPS through HDMI, audio through HDMI now, all USB ports work now, the add-on disk drive also works if you have that, so does Bluetooth and Ethernet, so you can connect your controllers remotely when previously you needed a cable, and it also lets you install that Linux system on a lot of firmware versions, from 3.0 all the way up to 7.61, although older firmwares will not support the M.2 SSD. This is fantastic work, and I might start by turning my own PS5 into a Linux gaming PC instead of using the PlayStation operating system, just to see if it works. And if it does, when I can no longer buy physical games on PlayStation, then it will still have my game collection that will run on that PS5, but I will also have a fully open computer running something like SteamOS, where I can play all my PC games and keep building that PC collection, which, yes, is digital, but I do have way more ownership over than what Sony offers. Now, there's a new Linux tablet on the market. It is the Juno Tab for Wi-Fi, which is a 13-inch device with a resolution of 1600 by 2560 at 60 Hz. It runs on an Intel platform. It's an Intel Ultra 5 CPU with Intel Arc Xe graphics. And of course, it runs Linux out of the box. It has 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage, it's made out of aluminium, and it has a detachable keyboard as well that is magnetically connected. It has active cooling with 2 fans in the tablet that they say are fully silent. There are 2 USB-C ports that handle charging, video out, and USB on the go, and the battery is 36 mAh. It comes pre-installed with Debian 14 or Ubuntu 26.04, but this is hardware that will very likely run any Linux distro because it is basically a PC in a tablet form factor. It retails for $989, which seems sort of reasonable for 1 terabyte of storage, 16 gigs of RAM, let's remember it's 2026, with a high-resolution display, a touchscreen, and PC internals. Like, this is not the most powerful CPU and GPU combo you could get, but it is going to be enough to run any Linux distro you want. And it is not the usual closed ARM platform with a lockdown bootloader where you will struggle to run anything other than what came pre-installed with it. This is a PC. You can install anything on it, and that's, I think, really neat. I reached out to them to see if I could get a review unit, because it would be very interesting to talk about on the channel, so expect a video, maybe if they send me one. Now, Google will have to pay 4.1 billion euros, that is 4.7 billion US dollars, to the EU. This is the result of a process that started in 2018 and was dragged through the courts for years and years. So, Google was found in 2018 to be abusing their dominant position by using Android to push their own products over the competition. What was deemed illegal specifically is the fact that Google forced device manufacturers to pre-install Google Search and Google Chrome if they wanted access to the Play Store, which obviously they did. Google also prevented manufacturers from selling devices that use Android versions that Google did not approve, so they couldn't sell the same device, one with official Google-endorsed Android, and the exact same device with something like Graphene OS, for example. That was not allowed. And also Google offered revenue sharing agreements if Google Search was pre-installed, which again pushed that search engine over anything else and is deemed illegal. This decision was appealed and transferred to another court, which has now confirmed the original ruling, so Google will have to pay and is deemed guilty of abusing their dominant position, which might have ramifications for other companies. Of course, Google says that Android is open, interoperable, and free, which is not exactly true because yes, those words are true, but only technically. If you want to provide the Android version that people want to get with the Play Store, the Google apps, then you need to give in to Google demands on what comes pre-installed, on revenue sharing, which financial agreements you can have with other partners, so you're not really free to use it however you please. Google says that they've implemented plenty of changes since the 2018 EU decision, but those changes weren't there when the decision was reached, so it doesn't absolve them from past mistakes. And look, for Google, 4 billion euros over 8 years is a giant nothing burger. They don't care, they make more money in maybe a few months than this fine will cost, so it doesn't have any impact on their bottom line. What is important is that this means that the EU considers it illegal to use your dominant position to enforce deals with manufacturers. And that's exactly what Microsoft is doing with Windows and PC hardware manufacturers. Which means maybe the EU will finally take a look at Windows, the forced sale of Windows on specific devices, the arrangements that they make to have Microsoft software pre-installed. All of this needs to be looked at as well, so please EU, apply the same rules to Microsoft because they're doing the exact same thing. Now let's talk about applications. It's been a while since I covered the updates to the GNOME app ecosystem, but there are tons of cool things this time around, so I kinda had to. First, Bazaar, the graphical store for Flatpak apps, it now lets distros use various widgets to showcase applications that they want to promote to users, making the store a bit more distro agnostic. And Bazaar will also let distributions showcase specific news or articles. They seem to have Markdown support in there, which means that the video I made about macOS where I said, hey, the App Store in macOS is just really solid these days, well, Bazaar is sort of replicating all of this, and distros being able to maybe explain patch notes for an update to the distro, or give some important messages or warnings about the distro, about a security issue straight from the store. I think that's really good. That's a pretty easy communication channel for users, and it's good that it's there. Next, we have a Notepad++ alternative in the form of Editide or Edit IDE. That is a sandboxed text editor / IDE. They bill it as a Notepad++ equivalent that has plenty of customization options and also supports Python extensions. There's also Wisp, which is a note widget that you can leave open on your desktop. It supports Markdown, you can swipe on your touchpad to switch between notes, and it now has Smart Text expansion, so you can type : twice and you'll get a pop-over to insert dynamic data like the date, specific dates, dice rolls, randomized characters to use as passwords or placeholder text, you name it. There's also Lockpicker, a tool to recover passwords using their hash. There's Newell, which is an AI assistant for GNOME that now supports image generation using Stable Diffusion. on top of having the usual generic AI assistant in text form. There's a GNOME shell extension now that displays your external IP in the top bar with a country flag, so if you use a VPN, you will see where you are at all times and you can check that everything is okay. There's also the media line extension for a nice minimalist media player in the top bar. It now supports progressive web apps too when they play any form of media, and a lot more stuff. It's really nice to see the app ecosystem of GNOME growing again and also moving towards more complex applications like that password recovery one, like the Notepad++ equivalent. It's fun, it's nice, and I feel that there's still progress to be made, but generally, this is probably the best ecosystem for applications that we've ever had on Linux at any point in time. Now, we apparently have a vulnerability in Plasma 6.7 that went unpatched and hasn't gotten a follow-up from the KDE security team, at least at the time I'm recording this. This issue allows for sandbox escapes, so an application, even a Flatpak, could gain access to things it doesn't usually have permissions to access. The way you trigger it is you just middle-click the application on the taskbar. This, by default on KDE, opens a new window of this app. The problem is this new window seems unconfined within the sandbox, even though the app should be. The developer who reported the issue noticed that this window did not remember their previously set credentials, logins, or settings. So looking at the PIDs and control groups, they saw that the window was not sandboxed, and thus the application could access anything it wanted on their system. The issue was reported in early April on the KDE security email address, and apparently it was ignored and isn't fixed in Plasma 6.7 yet. This also seems to go further because any app could change its own process name and child process name after they spawn, which is normal on Linux as far as I can tell, but this could lead to more problems because the app could just change its process name to a malicious binary, meaning that when you do that middle click to open thing, you would open a malicious program instead of the one you actually wanted. The disclosure period is now past, it's generally 90 days, and the KDE team hasn't fixed it, so the developer decided to publish the proof of concept to attract more attention to the problem. We'll see if it gets fixed. If that developer hasn't misrepresented the issue and it is as bad as it looks, I would assume it will get fixed relatively quickly because Valve uses KDE in SteamOS. They're not gonna move to Plasma 6.7 if this issue is in there, I would assume. Now, Microsoft cannot stop turning Windows into Linux because they shipped their new WSL solution, Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is called WSL-C, C for containers. It is basically just their container solution to build, manage, and run Linux containers using WSL, complete with GPU support, various SDK integrations, and everything you would expect from a container solution in 2026 with command line options. It is a public preview for now, complete with that command line interface to run the Linux distro. Windows apps also apparently can access those Linux containers directly, so you could write your code in VS Code in Windows and then deploy your stuff to a WSL container, all of that kind of stuff. Now, Microsoft seems to have realized that Windows is not the preferred place to develop stuff if you have an option, and instead of just doing a Windows version based on Linux, they're just slotting Linux everywhere they can inside of the system so developers can actually have access to a solid solution to develop some stuff. I don't know if WSL actually harms Linux or not. The growth of Linux on the desktop has kept going, even though Microsoft has released WSL a long while back, so for now, it doesn't seem to have harmed Linux at all, but who knows? Do you have places that use WSL instead of using Linux, and if WSL wasn't there, you would have used pure Linux instead? Let me know. Canonical is apparently going all in on Rust. They've now become a gold sponsor of the Trifecta Tech Foundation, which is an organization that works on making Rust infrastructure more prevalent in the world. For example, working on pseudo-Rust. So Canonical will donate $40,000 a year to that foundation. The next focus will be on NTPD Rust, which is a replacement for the network time daemon written in Rust. They aim to test it in 26.10 and to make it the default in 27.04. Other sponsors of the foundation include AWS and Google, but Canonical is the only gold tier sponsor currently. And if you're wondering why the focus on Rust specifically, Canonical says it's because it improves memory safety, thus it makes PCs and devices more robust. I guess the goal is to have fewer small vulnerabilities in many different parts of their system, so they can dedicate less time to patching all the supported versions of their distro and use that time for more interesting things. Canonical already adopted pseudo-Rust, the Rust core utilities, at least most of them, and they're experimenting with find-utils and diff-utils written in Rust too. Ubuntu actually has a tool in beta called Oxidizer that lets you experiment with replacing the usual GNU tools with their Rust version and moving back to the original ones if you run into an issue with the new ones. I don't know how they specifically decide what they want to replace next. Is it just the thing that is ready right now or looks ready and someone else has worked on? Or is it just small individual components that they can easily swap out and replace with a Rust version so they don't have to change an entire dependency chain everywhere? Don't really know, but I think it is interesting to see. Like, Canonical does have their own focus these days, and you might not like it. I don't like everything they do, but at least they have something that they want to dedicate their time and energy on, which is Snaps, Rust, and Flutter. It might not be the place where I personally want to be on my computer, but you can't fault them for not having a direction anymore, at least. The Fedora Council apparently wants to shut down the entire conversation around the proposed AI developer desktop version of Fedora. They say that they've come to the conclusion that the current process they have for submitting community initiatives and getting some feedback on it, that process is completely ineffective, and thus the AI developer desktop should not be proposed through this channel. Instead, if the project matures, it will have to be proposed through the usual path to become a Fedora remix. In the meantime, it has to stay an experiment made by someone on their own. They don't have any official Fedora support, any official backing or trademark use or whatever else. They say that they encourage people interested to work on that AI developer desktop to do so, just do so on your own platform, not in the Fedora community forums directly. The council also added that their community initiatives project just doesn't work to surface ideas and get respectful, actionable feedback on it, and they say that they need to address that. So they're stopping the entire community initiatives process, and they're moving all of the stuff that was currently supported through that process as council-backed projects. This includes Fedora Atomic, Fedora Forge, and Fedora Docs 2026. They will be working on another way to get these ideas from the community and to get the community's feedback on them, maybe in a more actionable manner than what is basically a forum. And yeah, that project was never going to go down well with the community. It has AI in the name, which instantly makes a lot of people hate it by default. Now, this was not trying to put AI inside of Fedora by default for everyone. It was trying to build an ISO, a remix that has all the tools pre-installed, so people who want to use AI or want to develop AI solutions would have a place to do so that is pre-configured. There were some issues with pre-installing NVIDIA drivers and whatever licensing issues around that, but generally it wouldn't have harmed anyone if it existed. Like, I do despise AI, but that project doesn't annoy me. It would be like being annoyed at Fedora Budgie for existing just because you don't like Budgie. No one is making Budgie the default, you don't have to use it. The AI desktop developer thingy would not have forced you to use AI, although Fedora does want to add AI solutions in the future, which is another can of worms. And on that community initiative thing, just implement some kind of feature request process. You let people create their idea. People who are connected, logged in to that community can just put a thumbs up or a thumbs down and type a one comment, one statement saying why they support it or why they think it's bad. Not an ongoing conversation in the proposal itself, you can still have that on the forums, but on the proposal itself you can quickly gauge how much people like it or not. You see the thumbs up, then you look at the various things that people seem to think about it, and then you say, okay, this project has enough traction, let's discuss it fully to see if technically it is possible, and that's when you start having the actual technical complaints and problems with it, and you can say, this is a purely technical solution because the community seems to want this, we're gonna see if it's achievable. So anything that is not linked to that technical aspect has already been removed with the thumbs up or thumbs down process. The tons of companies and websites have that process already. It's not that complicated, it's a very basic thing. Some Linux kernel developers are getting increasingly annoyed at the constant disclosures about the use of AI in the various patches written for the kernel. Christian Browner started a thread on that topic saying that he finds that very annoying to see the Git history cluttered with AI model names and versions and features, basically acting like free advertisement for these AI companies and their proprietary models. He said that probably this disclosure should be fully removed because it doesn't really help with anything, or at least he says that just the common name of the AI tool would suffice instead of having the entire version number and other information related to that. Not everyone is apparently following these guidelines anyway. Some people just don't tell that they used AI even though they did. The disclosure doesn't really give you much more info on what was actually done using AI. Which parts of the code were written purely by AI, written by AI but corrected or improved by a human, what was used to just do code review or testing, all of that you don't know. Other developers also said that the signal-to-noise ratio of that tag is low, meaning it is a lot of info for no real actionable use, and they also proposed dropping it. We'll see if Torvalds decides to do anything with that, to change that policy or guideline or not. I think it is useful to see what was written by AI because it does give you a little indication that maybe you should pay more attention to it, just to check that it's not purely vibe-coded garbage. But at the same time, if everything has the assisted by AI tag, then nothing specifically jumps out at you, and so it just becomes noise and useless information. It's like when your boss comes in and says that everything that you need to ship right now is priority 1, which means nothing is urgent anymore because everything is on the exact same priority level. Kind of the same thing here. Anyway, this will conclude today's episode. I'll leave you in the capable hands of this sunburned guy talking about Tuxedo Computers, our sponsor. So if you've listened to a single one of these episodes for the past maybe 2 or 3 years, you know who they are. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. They're based in Germany, but they ship to most countries in the world, and they have a wide range of computers, small form factor laptops, bigger laptops, basic integrated GPU ones, all the way up to giant gaming laptops, gaming workstations, productivity towers, you name it, all the options are there, keyboard layouts, logo engraved, some color options for specific laptops, Windows pre-installed if you want that as a dual boot. You have everything you need there. I only use Tuxedo Computers and I've been doing so for the past 3 or 4 years now. They're really fantastic and the link, as usual, is down in the description. And that should about do it. Thank you all for watching and or listening. You know where all the YouTube buttons are. Please do click them. It really does help the channel. Please leave a comment, even if it's just for the algorithm. And you also have plenty of links down in the description to support the channel, including one to get a daily version of this show, complete with a nice RSS feed if you go through Patreon, so you can listen to it on any podcast client. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!